What's going on YouTube? I hope everyone is having a great day. In this video we are going to be separating the engine from the generator to hopefully figure out that weird ticking noise that I am hearing. I want to apologize for taking so long to get this video out. I've had some technical difficulties with an SSD that has unfortunately failed. After it failed, I thought I had lost all the files because I normally delete them after I upload them to the computer. Thankfully, I still had most of them on the SD cards. So the only part of the video you guys are not going to see is where I tape off the intake, the exhaust, and then the coolant inlet and outlet. So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the video and have a blessed day. Next step, let's go ahead and remove these two bolts on the radiator. Now that we got the radiator unhooked on both sides, should just be able to take this hose off and just lift it out. Alright, so unfortunately I was wrong. We can't just remove those two bolts on both sides and pull that radiator. We're going to have to pull this whole front, like sheet metal and bracket and bracing, all that stuff. So I'm going to pull that battery out first, and then there's a few self-threading screws right there. There should be one in that back corner right there as well, but it is missing. And it's the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to get those out and see if we can just pull this whole front assembly. Let's go ahead and start on this side. Like I said, there is there's actually four. Two here. No, I take that back. There is only three because we're only looking for this frame part. Alright, so now we should be able to pull this whole front assembly. So now that we got the radiator and the front support out of the way, it is time to remove, well, not remove, but disconnect the fuel lines running to the engine. And then we're going to take off the fuel tank. So let's start by getting these fuel lines unhooked. So before I unhook this feed line to the pump, I'm going to turn that off so that it doesn't pull anything else out of the tank. hope it doesn't have too much fuel in it. Alright, so next on our agenda, we need to take off the 2 hose clamps for the fuel lines running from the tank. We also need to disconnect the fuel gauge. You guys aren't going to be able to see it, but I'll get a picture and put it on screen. There is 2 bolts on each side holding that fuel tank on. So after we get all of that done, I'll get those out and we can take that fuel tank off. Go ahead and thread those back on so I don't lose those. Alright, I got all 4 bolts holding that fuel tank unbolted. Let's go and remove the tank. You guys should be able to see a little better view of what I was talking about, where these slots are. That's where the bolts were. Alright, so off camera, I went ahead, I got those fuel lines out of the way, routed them back through, took them all the way out, took the fuel filter housing out, took off the battery cables. So now we're going to disconnect the electronics that go to the engine. So that water temp light, or water temp warning light wiring, just as easy, just slide that off. If you watch part 2, we did that as well to access the glow plugs. And then next we have the 5mm hex on the solenoid. The only reason this has to be removed is because it's hardwired and doesn't have that connector anymore. We also need to disconnect that ground that goes to the block. There's our power to our glow plugs, so that's also disconnected. Before we get ahead of ourselves, there's a little bit more wiring on the starter side of the engine. One thing that I've been doing that'll hopefully help keep me organized is I've been labeling the wires and where they go. I'm pretty sure that is the oil pressure. Couple wires here on the starter. All right. Alright, so next we're going to pull off this solenoid. Alright, now that we got all the spaghetti out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and hang the rigging, at least something to hold up the generator part. I got the rigging hung. Time to separate the engine from the generator. I apologize for interrupting the video again. I just want to show you guys how the engine and generator actually connect, because I feel like I didn't do a very good job showing it on camera. but that coupling disc that I talk about that has the 3 bars with the 6 screws, that is what actually connects the engine and the generator part, which is just the flywheel to the armature. So on screen you can see that's part number 4, which is the coupling disc. And then the bars that I talk about are number 7, and there's 3 of those. So basically, that's how the engine connects to the generator. Hopefully that helps. Enjoy the rest of the video. I'm going to start by removing the bolts that actually connect the engine to the generator, which is that strip right there. There's a bolt here and a bolt up here, and there's also one down there and one over there that you can't see. So in total there's 6 bolts that I need to take out there. So I'm going to start on that, and then I'll record getting the bell housing bolts out. As you can see right there, I already took one out. I did that so I could run down to the hardware store and pick up some bolts for the engine stand. I got the bolts out that connect the engine with the generator. So time to do the bell housing bolts. Already did the lower 4 that are pretty difficult to get to. The one thing I want to mention is when you're taking out the bolts that connect the engine with the generator, you probably need to counterhold. That's what I had to do. They're not super tight, but they're tight enough that when you're trying to break them loose, it'll spin the engine. Alright, so let's go ahead and get the last 3 bell housing bolts out, and then the 2 engine mounts, and then we should be free. So the bell housing bolts are out and the flywheel connecting bolts are out. So I guess let's go ahead and loosen up these engine mounts and see if the engine will come out. Now that we have the engine mounts loose and all the bolts out, all the wiring disconnected, should be time to pull the engine. Alright, so I adjusted the rigging so that it wouldn't be pulling straight up, it would be pulling that way, so that way we can swing the engine out, spin it, and put it on the stand. Alright, I'm going to get back with you guys whenever I get the engine bolted up. Alright, well, as you can see, I got the engine out and it is on the stand. I just wanted to give you guys a little rundown. So you can see the radiator needs cleaned, engine still needs cleaned, all of this stuff needs cleaned, but that's where I'm going to leave it for this episode. Next episode, my plan is to get the engine running on the stand so that we can rule out any sort of noise from that, and if that checks out, then we'll start looking to the generator for that possible noise. As well as that, next episode, I'm going to tackle some of this wiring. As you can see, all the corrosion and stuff in those connectors, I'd like to clean that up. I'd also like to pull the stator and the armature out. That way I can replace the armature bearing and do the modification that I saw Banter Arc Force do. I'm going to leave his YouTube down below. But basically, there's a tolerance ring that the bearing rides on, and over time that bearing kind of eats away at that tolerance ring. So you would have to basically do what I'm doing right now and tear everything back out just to get in there and replace the tolerance ring and the bearing. So I'd like to kind of create a more permanent fix. So we'll see how that goes. But until next time, make sure whatever you do, do it for the glory of God, and have a blessed rest of your day.